Oh, hello, hello. Welcome back, dear followers, to another Jive stream. It's Sunday evening, the last evening of the month of March. Tomorrow begins Ēosturmōnaþ, or as it's easier and perhaps less pretentious to say in modern English, Easter month. Very important month for anglo-saxon pagans, a very holy month. I'm going to talk about that a bit tonight, and I'm going to talk about some other things to do with paganism. I want to talk a bit about priests. I just remembered, I had to get something. Yeah. Run downstairs. Downstairs. One about I forgot one of my books that I wanted to read from for tonight, so my wife's just gone to fetch it. Disaster averted. So before I talk about that stuff, let's talk about Ēosturmōnaþ. So this is an entire month Anglo-Saxons dedicated to the goddess Ēostra, who was a goddess of the dawn. No, Easter is not related to the word Ishtar. I should think that most of the people who watch Survivor Jive know a level where they know that Ishtar is a folk etymology, the relationship between Easter and Ishtar. That's a Semitic word with no relation to it. Nor indeed is Easter related to the Greek word. Thank you, dear wife. Nor is it related to the Greek word which becomes estrogen. I heard someone say that because, of course, the word estrogen itself is a modern invention and it derived from an ancient Greek word, but it doesn't refer to the hormone anyway. Anyway, that's not related to it. No, it comes from, it comes from the Germanic root. So she's known in, it comes from Anglo-Saxon Ēostra, and it was equivalent, that's recorded in by Bede, the monk Bede, a Christian monk who was writing about the naughty pagan practices of his people, the English. And it's later been found by the Brothers Grimm that are recorded in the 19th century, that there were German peasants recalling a goddess associated with Easter called Ostara. And that is the cognate of Ēostra, without any doubt. And it's interesting because, the majority of countries in Europe, it's Germanic countries, call the celebration of Easter by something like related to Paschal or Pascal or something like that, coming from the original Jewish name for it, or whatever it is. Maybe it's Greek, I'm not sure, sorry about that. But anyway, only England has preserved this name, and there's only one ever explanation from any person contemporary, and that's Bede, and he explains it as it's a goddess, and there's no reason at all to disbelieve him. And then also the fact that we have this later German folklore with a cognate continental goddess Ostara, it's pretty much, I mean, there's not really any reason to question that, although there are some kooky people that academics don't question that this is a real thing. But anyway, linguists have now reconstructed that this is a goddess that goes even back to pre-Germanic times. Sorry, I always bump into the table and make noises. I know probably people get annoyed, but at least now I've got rid of the squeaky chair and I've got a brand new chair. So thank you all for donations. I was finally able to get an office chair instead of a squeaky old wooden one. So the reconstruction that linguists come up with is presumed to be an Indo-European goddess of the dawn as well. I will try, can't pronounce Indo-European, but it's something like Ausos. And that's Chausos, which is also the root name. This Indo-European goddess also became the Vedic goddess Ushas, who's a goddess of the dawn, also was in early India when the Aryans were first around in India in the Bronze Age. And one of the honorific titles for her was Brahti, which means high, and that's cognate with the Proto-Celtic Briganti, which means the high one, and that's the Brigantes are a tribe in Britain as well, and the name of a British goddess, Brigantia, who is also more familiar from the Irish form Bridget. So I would presume Bridget to be related to the Germanic Ostara as a Celtic form. And it's interesting that the beginning in the Celtic calendar, the beginning of the Celtic year, the year is divided between two gods, and Bridges half of the year is starting around the end of April. So obviously Celtic and Germanic are different, but you can see there's a connection there, because in my opinion, the end of this month is probably the biggest part of the month, but we don't know how exactly the pagan Anglo-Saxons celebrated this month. But because Bede just says that there were many feasts to the goddess celebrated in April. How many were they and what were they like? Well, there's no reason to believe they were the same as the Christian celebration of Easter when that's placed. And in fact, Bede, as a Catholic, he was arguing a lot with the Catholic, with the Celtic Christians in Britain, because they had a different calculation of Easter and they were arguing over it. So the exact date, but there's no reason to think that either were influenced by the Germanic pagan celebrations of the exact date of Easter. Only the influence that the Christians took from the Germanic pagans is that they named the festival after the month-long series of festivals that the pagans had in honor of the goddess Easter. So how do we imagine how they do it? I'll tell you how I understand how Easter month should be celebrated. One thing I think is perhaps worth considering is the 27th of April and sometimes the 28th later on in Roman history, but the Romans celebrated on the 27th of April Floralia, which was a flower festival. So it's possible that something like that was celebrated by the Romano Celts in Britain, and it might be that this has a common Indo-European origin we don't know about, and that maybe a flower festival was celebrated. Now, in any case, if there was, that's a bit of a stretch, but if there wasn't, well, we can be sure that flowers were involved, because this is the time in England. It's beautiful flowers right now. I go walking in the forest, it's full of daffodils and all kinds of other things, little wooden anemones popping up. The primroses have been out for ages, and the bluebells are just starting to pop up now. So it's lovely, and I can imagine that that's what people thought then too. So, well, that might be one thing, but my main thing to point out is, and I said this in my May Day and the Goddess Easter video, which I did last year, is that I think that the whole month, whatever the celebrations were within this month, we don't know. We'll have to reconstruct our own, I suppose. But what we can be sure is that it culminated in the climactic event on the night before the end of the 1st of May, which is like May Day. And that even was such a big event that it still has very pagan-like celebrations practiced in England today that didn't stop. And I'm going to be doing a film about some of those. I'm going to travel out to a couple of different places in Britain to film some of these really unusual folk customs that preserved what this was, although they no longer invoke the goddess Easter, but they do elect a May Queen, who I believe to be a stand-in for this goddess. Yeah, I would ask you to check out that video when it comes out, and it will come out soonish, I suppose. And I will also request that you check out that May video that I did last year. Because I cover everything very clearly there that you need to know about that subject. Now, another thing you've got to check out, I forgot to mention this, I should have done this at the start. What have I been up to? Well, I've been working on a few different things, working on a prayer video, working on getting that might get a musical accompaniment to it, some of the stuff. But the stuff I've been up to, one of the main things I really want to push, I don't think it's had enough views yet, is a new animation, a new cartoon that I did with Smile Titans. That's Christopher Steininger. Smile Titans. Have you subscribed to him? Why on earth not? He's the guy who did the Spirit of Yule cartoon. And now he's done one with me about the sacred apples of youth. And that's a perennial Indo-European myth that we cover it in animated form with the aid of his amazing illustrations. I'll show you a quick clip from it because I have the technology to do that. My boomer abilities will stretch to the creation, the necessary. Wait, is this it? I believe it is. Yes, it is. Okay, here it's up on the screen. And now I merely have to share the screen with you. And yeah, well, here you go. I'm not sure if you're getting audio, but I'm not going to show you all of it anyway. Even the very oldest of tales is older than men know. But the similarities of the myths of diverse peoples betray a common origin, lost in the darkness of eons. The ancient Greeks told stories of a sacred tree in a beautiful garden near the ocean in the farthest of the western lands, and that this tree and its golden apples were tended by 3 fair divine nymphs, the Hesperides, each represented by a different tree, the willow, the poplar, and the elm. They had with them a foul serpent named Ladon, which guarded the apples with its 100 fierce heads, until one day Hercules slew that monster, stole the apples to complete one of his 12 tasks for King Eurystheus. The Celts also told of such a mystical land in the West. That's your lot. That's your lot. I'm not giving you any more. It's on the internet anyway. Just go. It doesn't cost anything to watch it. Just go and Smile Titans on his channel and watch the rest of it there. You ought to have seen it. Don't know why. I tried to share it on my thing, but it didn't. Not everyone saw it. So yeah, I was pleased with the way it came out. I think you guys should check it out, and share it, because it's normally friendly. It's just, you've got the Celtic myths, you've got the Greek myths, you've got the Norse myth, and it shows how they all have the apple myth, and it shows there's an obvious common origin to it. And then I also point out at the end that I didn't actually talk about the genetics of it, but they've done genetic studies on apples, and they're pretty sure that apples originate in Kazakhstan around the time of the Yamna. So it's likely that every time you eat an apple, you can thank those Bronze Age bad boys. All right. What else have I got to talk about tonight? Have I got any no super chats to read? Okie doke. I wanted to talk about something. I got about priests, because I was talking about Bede already, right? The Venerable Bede. Oh, I got a super chat. Enjoying your channel and learning a ton. Thank you. Fortune and glory. Thank you very much for that. I will say that Bede, he gives us an account of a pagan priest in England. Now, we got the Norse sources talking about the Gothis, and in Iceland, it kind of they had a shortage of people, and it seems like the Gothi became the chieftain priest sort of they became one thing, but I don't think that's how it was originally. They didn't really have proper kings in Iceland like they did in Norway. They had a bit of a unique setup that was not the same as with the rest of the Germanic peoples. But the Anglo-Saxons, we don't have very much sources on their paganism, as you know, but we do get this account of Coifi and Paulinus, and Bede talks about the conversion of Edwin. Now, that whole story could probably be taken as not an actual historical event, but as a mythical event, wherein the different characters are symbolic of different people. Like Edwin himself, the name Edwin is cognate with the Norse Germanic name, which is one of Odin's names. So it could be that Edwin was also a name of Woden, and that his conversion is symbolic of the conversion. Even the gods would convert to Christianity. And Coifi himself is a priest who converts to Christianity, saying, "I am the most devout of the pagans. I give all my life to paganism, and it hasn't helped me at all. So if it doesn't work, if it hasn't helped me, it won't help anyone. And that therefore, I think we should all become Christians right now, right, without any delay, and we should immediately burn all the temples and stop practice." So it doesn't sound very realistic at all. And even the other pagan, the only other pagan who speaks is the guy who just says, "That's right," and agrees with everything he says, and gives a little story about the passage of a bird from in a hall and going out, which may have had religious symbolism within pagan religion. I suspect it did, because otherwise it seems a bit of a random thing to have just said in response to the previous comment. So I think that the whole story was a concocted myth to reinforce the legitimacy of of Christianity among the Anglo-Saxons. But therefore, and I'm not the only one who thinks that, so it's quite a common view among historians. But there's some interesting things in that story that reveal to us what was known about these priests. And interestingly, they correspond with other Indo-European priests. What do you know about that? So there's a commonality. Anglo-Saxons were Indo-European, so you can expect that there was things going on. Now, so all it says, not very much from the Anglo-Saxons, I might as well just start with that. Basically, it says about him that his priestly life is a mystery. He says that he was performing all the necessary actions, whatever they were. We can presume it was sacrifices, etc. But he also says that restrictions were placed upon Coifi, the priest. He was in Northumbria, by the way, a northerner. He was not allowed to carry weapons, and he could not ride a stallion. So he had to ride a mare. So one of the things he does to show that, the end of paganism is he gets on, he jumps on a strider, mounts a stallion, holds a spear, and chucks it into the temple, or at the temple. Now we know the symbolism of the spear as Odinic, and basically this priest like taking on a warrior aspect and using an Odinic symbol in a defiance against a pagan structure is all symbolic. It's not an event that actually happened. It's an event. It's a symbolic event which is meant to reinforce the understanding of paganism having failed and Christianity succeeding in its place. But let me tell you some interesting things about some others taken from Mitravarana. This is by Ēosturmōnaþ, the expert on Indo-European tripartite hypothesis. And I think he talks about the similarities. He's comparing just two, really, but with a little bit of talk about a third. But he's mainly talking about the commonalities between the Flamen Dialis and the Brahmin. So, that's a Roman priestly role, and the Brahmin caste in India, who are the high caste, the priestly caste, the highest caste in India. So, the Flamen Dialis, and I apologize if my Latin is not, I don't speak it correctly. My pronunciation may be well off, and my Sanskrit for that matter. The Flamen Dialis cannot be made to swear an oath, so according to Plutarch. And the Brahmin can never, any more than the king, the ascetic, the madman, or the criminal, be cited as a witness. Okay? Now, was there a Germanic parallel? Can't say about that. The Flamen Dialis must not so much as look upon armed troops. Okay, that's the parallel, right? The Coifi wasn't allowed to hold weapons. The Brahmin must suspend his sacred knowledge, that is his reason for living, whenever he hears the hiss of arrows or is in the midst of an army, and so on, according to the laws of Manu. Okay, so here we have the same thing. Indo-European priests are not supposed to fight. They're not supposed to be involved with war. They're not supposed to touch weapons. And if they're a Germanic priest and the Roman Flamen Dialis, not even supposed to look upon an army. I think that's a clear common source from three sources there. The Flamen Dialis, apart from being forbidden any journey outside Rome, must neither mount a horse. Can't mount a stallion if you're an Anglo-Saxon priest. It's the same. Same origin, obviously, Indo-European origin. The Brahmin must not study on horseback, nor it seems sit on any animal or in any vehicle, according to the laws of Manu. Okay, same thing, right? Some other things that aren't attested in the Germanic now. The Flamen Dialis must not approach a funeral pyre. The Brahmin must avoid the smoke from a funeral pyre and cease his sacred studies in any village where a funeral procession is passing. Maybe that one didn't apply to Germanic priests. I don't know. The Flamen Dialis must avoid drunkenness and abstain from touching fermented substances. Likewise, the Brahmin must not consume alcoholic drinks, according to the laws of Manu, Satapada Brahmana. So perhaps Now that's hard to know. Would the Germanic priest, would an Anglo-Saxon priest be allowed to consume alcohol? It seems that alcohol was so vital in the rituals of Germanic peoples, of the toasting and stuff, and the pouring of libations. So maybe that one didn't count. We don't have any sources that talk about abstaining from alcohol, only being moderate, according to the Hávamál. Moderate use of alcohol, but that shouldn't just be applying to priests. Surely that should apply to everyone. The Flamen must not anoint himself with an oil in open air, says Plutarch. The Brahmin, after having rubbed his head with oil, must not touch any part of his body with oil, in the laws of Manu. If oil was used in a devotional way, then perhaps this applied. The Flamen is forbidden to touch raw meat, according to Aulus Gellius, Plutarch. And the Brahmin must not eat any meat that has not first been offered in sacrifice, according to the laws of Manu. I know, obviously, modern Hindus don't eat meat at all, but the Vedics did eat meat. They did definitely eat meat, and but I think that, as I said in my video on the sacred cow, originally it was that you don't eat meat until first dedicating it to the gods. That then for it becomes acceptable to eat, because otherwise you eat only sin. But the idea of completely abstaining from meat didn't exist in Indo-European religion as a general rule. But perhaps there were certain priestly castes who had special rules and dietary restrictions. It may have been the case in Germanic peoples too. And also it says that he must never accept anything. A Brahmin must never accept anything from the owner of a slaughterhouse, or of a distillery, or of an oil press, or a house of prostitution. So you can't take your Christmas cards from the pimp anymore if you want to be a pagan priest. The Flamen may not touch or even name a dog, Plutarch says. The Brahmin may not read the Vedas when he hears a dog bark, says Laws of Manu, nor eat food that has touched a dog or has come from people who breed dogs. Now, a lot of people in Northern Europe love their dogs, so they might find this one hard to believe, but I think it's possible. It's quite possible that that special rules applied to priests that didn't apply to other people, so maybe they weren't allowed. I've got some. I'll carry on in a second. I see I've got some super chats from Upvote Overlord. Animated series of pagan myths researched by and narrated by Tom, possibly paid, would be awesome. Who else agrees? Well, thank you very much. I will continue to work with Christopher Stanier, because he does great work and I'm really enjoying what he's producing. So as long as he's willing to, I'll continue doing them. Rugian Warlord. Example, took je god om flimmene de lager. I like the films you make. That means thank you. Thank you. L Monk. So thank you also to L Monk and NV. And Ride the Tiger, thank you. You sent a PayPal donation in lieu of super chat. Thank you for all your efforts to revive our religious roots. No problem. Let me continue. So yeah, maybe Germanic priests weren't allowed to have dogs either. We don't have any examples of godis in the sagas with dogs, but we don't have any examples of them saying they can't have dogs either. So I don't know. There's some other ones saying that they can. But one, the Flamen may not, even at night, completely remove his religious insignia, so his religious vestments or whatever they are, necklaces and things like this. Maybe it can't always be everything taken off. He has to have always some mark of his caste. And his wife must retire only by way of an enclosed staircase, so that her undergarments might not ever be seen. And the Brahmin must never strip completely naked, and he must never see his wife naked. So both times there's some similarities. And it's also another coincidence. There's other stuff in there, but none of these other ones are attested among the Germanics. But I think it's important to look at these, because when there's an obvious correlation between India and Rome, and then you see some correlations with the Germanics as well, you can assume it's an Indo-European origin. And there's one thing that we have also is the color schemes of the vestments. Like the Flamen Dialis, the holy color is white to wear for them. The Brahmin color was originally white. Likewise, the royal colors for a Raj in early Indian culture was red, and in Rome as well. Rome, red is that, it has that connotation. Now, what do we know about the Celts? Same thing, and that's in an Irish and the Gaelic source. There's two sources, both attesting that the Druids wore white vestments. So I think it's quite reasonable to say that white was the color of a pagan priest, of Indo-European pagan priests, and we can assume quite reasonably that the Gaudi, or the whatever the anglo-saxon name for a priest was, he would have worn white. He would have worn white. He wouldn't have carried weapons. He wouldn't be riding a horse unless perhaps it was mare, and probably perhaps not even that was considered very good of him to do either. I find that very interesting indeed, and I think we should take this into account. I mean, I'm not a priest. I'm not a pagan priest. I'm not a Gaudi, but I mean, but I think if people want to dedicate their lives to serving communities as a religious leader, good for you. Good for you. A very noble endeavor. If you feel that you are worthy of that position, and that you will, but don't. I hope you will understand that this would require sacrifice, not just the duty of making sacrifices, but sacrifices in your life. You're going to have to make. You're going to have to change yourself. It's like even the priesthood in Christianity they used to have a lot of severe life sacrifices they had to make. It's benefits to being a religious authority, but there's also, you have to give something in return. So let me have a look at your comments now. I'll go into it. Delusional and foolish. Silly man. Silly people. Bruh, Hindus do eat meat. I'm a Hindu and I like chicken. Okay, well, I know that I've been to India and I know that everyone eats chicken and stuff, but it's like, you know, Muslims don't drink alcohol, but, you know, I've been to Muslim countries and I know they do drink alcohol, and, you know, whatever they say, like, you're supposed not to eat meat, right? Only Brahmins are strictly vegetarian. Okay, well, yeah, but they didn't used to be. That's what I was trying to say. Bad future for dogs without the Europeans around. The rules for Brahmin farming are about maintaining purity, said Carolyn. Yeah, something about that. It's about maintaining purity. That's exactly it. They're about maintaining purity. The idea that a dog, that they're not allowed to see naked women, they're not allowed to see war, they're not allowed to see violence, they're not allowed to come into contact with dogs or people who work with prostitutes. It's all about maintaining purity. And that principle, that we should attach that same principle to someone who is a Gaudi. He should be pure. He should be separate from these kind of sinful activities. And he should wear white, because that's what the tradition is. Wear white. And what is this? Oh, a super chat from Franz Malacha. I don't know what language that name comes from. Thanks for everything. By the way, your socks on Teespring are bad. Okay, no one's told me that. I'll delete them. I'll delete that from the store. I'm sorry that they weren't good. I didn't know that. I don't get to see the products, but I've seen the t-shirts and I bought the hat, and the hat was good. I bought the hat. The only product I got from Teespring myself was the hat. But everyone else has told me the t-shirts and the hoodies and everything, they've all been like sending me photos of what they buy, and they're all happy with it. You're the first person who's had a problem with any of the products, but no one else has mentioned the socks. So Franz, I will take your word for it and I'll remove the socks from the store. Baron Badger, thank you very much for that donation. Loving the recent jungle videos. Yeah, thanks, mate. I'm glad you do. The jungle videos, I wasn't sure how people would take them. Everyone seems to love them. They don't get very many views, though. and one who's got the last one. It's got like three or 4,000. Like I normally get easily double that. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know what's going on. I mean, I think that people who like things maybe are more. That doesn't sound right. I was going to say people who like things are more vocal than people who don't. Usually, people love complaining, but I don't know. I don't know why people aren't watching it this much. Love to see more Slavic stuff from you collaborating with a Slavic pagan. I've said I'm going to go, Morgan Richards. I'm going to go to Poland and do a Slavic thing. I mean, there isn't as much Slavic material, so I don't cover Slavic as much. There's not very much stuff recorded on Slavic paganism, and I don't have any contact with Slavic people because I live in England. I'm a Germanic person, so obviously that's why. It's quite a good reason for it. But I do say that anyone who's interested in Slavic paganism, ignore anyone who talks about the Slavic Vedas, because those are nonsense. £20. Thank you very much from Daniel Roberto Prieto. The Romans were aware of the similarities of European pagans, and they used to interpret gods from this point of view. Did they get things wrong? Have we learned new things about these common origins? That was a process called Interpretatio Romana, and it wasn't wrong. It was not quite the same as they didn't recognize the Indo-European. They didn't understand that Indo-Europeans existed. They didn't understand that Germanic and Celtic religions came from the same root as theirs. They didn't understand that. That wasn't discovered until the 19th century by a certain Welshman. But what they understood was that there were similar. They thought that their gods were the gods, and that anyone who had gods, it was the same gods, and they just were worshiping them under different names. So what they were doing was just seeing what if a god looked a bit like one of their gods in a certain way, they just say, "Oh, that's Mars," okay? And in a way that was annoying for historians now, because then they say, "Oh, we see the Celts have a cult of Mars here," or something like that. Well, we know they didn't have a cult of Mars. We have to then guess which god they're talking about. And since we don't have all the names of gods of Germanic and Celtic gods, or Slavic gods or whatever, so it's annoying, because if they'd just written down what the actual people who were worshipping this god called him instead of what they presumed him to be equivalent to, we would know a lot more. So yeah, but sometimes did they get it wrong? Who's to say? It's generally agreed that like the model of Interpretatio Romana is a clunky fit, because they're assuming that there's a direct equivalent all the time, when there isn't necessarily. But I mean, yeah, maybe they're not such a bad. I mean, they're certainly choosing these equivalents for a reason. Like Mercury and Odin, maybe there are similarities that they could see that they considered important, but they might not be. Maybe we wouldn't consider them to be equivalent. Maybe we would have chosen now, looking from a different perspective on Odin and Roman gods, might have considered him to be more equivalent to a different god. Nick Tobin says, what specific traditions inform your personal practice? I am European, specifically Irish. Christianity has always seemed foreign to me. I'm looking to connect with my spirituality, my ancestors. Anglo-Saxon paganism is I practice Anglo-Saxon paganism. Is that what you're asking? Sorry, Nick, I didn't quite understand. I tried to make it clear I practice Germanic paganism, so the tradition is Germanic paganism, but informs your personal practice. Well, I mean, all the calendar celebrations I make videos about, all the burial customs that are recorded in archaeology, like all the, well, not the burial customs, because I never buried anyone, but the associated customs are found around burials and the sacrifices and things. So yeah, I mean, I've talked about it in my prayer video as well. I've talked about this in other videos in great length, so I think you should just check through them. But if you're, as an Irishman, I suppose you should probably, presuming I am European, specifically Irish. Why didn't you just say you're Irish? If you're, yeah, looking to learn a bit more about Irish and mythology and paganism that interests you, if you don't want to be a Christian, then yeah, I suppose you can look into it. I'm not an expert on Irish stuff though, so not the one to give you advice on that. But thank you for your donation, Nick. But I see now that's a Canadian to your Canadian. So also I wouldn't be so sure that you're 100% Irish, by the way. But I know some people think they are, but maybe I'm not saying you know your ancestry better than me, but I'm just saying like maybe you're not, because yeah, a lot of people in the New World have overplayed their Irishness. They've talked it up a bit more than it is. Your hair's looking stylish. What do you ask your barber for? Same as usual. That's what I say. Short back and sides with a blend. I just say. Do you think the River Dan in Germany is named after the tribe of Dan from the Old Testament? No. The migrations of the tribe of Israel into Europe, there was no such migration. There were no tribes of Israel migrating around the world. That's just all Jewish mythology. It didn't happen. What is your favorite locally brewed beer? Local to where? Where I grew up, I used to drink a beer called, I've said this before and somewhere else, I remember I've said all this. My favorite beer growing up was from West Berkshire Breweries. It was called Good Old Boy. And that's not local to where I live now in Devon. I rather like, there's a beer called Exmoor Ale. That's quite good. It's good. But not Exmoor Gold. I don't like that so much. And thank you for your donation, JR Captain. Franz, again, no worries, all good. I assumed you didn't know. That's why I told you. Take it as a donation anyway. Thank you very much, Franz. It's very generous of you. I'll just remember. I'll forget to take those socks off unless I put the listing up now. And then I'll do it after the stream because I don't want to have them up there. If I don't want people buying stuff that's no good. I am chugging Bucky, mate. He must be Scottish then, the inundation. And Bucky is, for you foreigners, is a colloquial expression for a tonic wine called Buckfast. It's brewed by monks in an abbey in Devon, here in Devon, and it has tonic. It doesn't have tonic qualities apparently, but it does because they've loaded it with caffeine. It's going to be something like somewhere between Four Loko and red wine for Americans want a reference point. And its biggest market is Scotland. Scottish people love it. Most other people don't touch it, but Scottish people love it. And they call it Bucky. Sinov speaks. Hi, Tom. I was wondering what your view on Zoroastrianism is. It is Indo-European and old, but it is also essentially spawned later monotheism. Yes, thank you for your donation, Sinov. I agree with your assessment there. I've not read Western, texts and not studied it in great detail. But obviously, what I know is Zoroaster was a reformer, so he was taking like the Indo-Aryan religion that was existent in Persia and turning it into something completely different. So in the one sense, it's useful because we can see stuff to do with like what the in the Indo-Aryan religion of the Andronovo people used to be like a bit more. And maybe we can also understand a bit more about like what the Scythian religion might have been a bit like. But it's not the same. It's a very different thing. It's not just that it's monotheistic. It's that he's turned what deities that were formerly worshipped into baddies, and it becomes something altogether different. It's a totally different kettle of fish from paganism. It isn't paganism. So that's about all I can say on the matter because I haven't studied it in any detail, so I can't give you any more detailed analysis than that. This is the brain. What's a mixture of A&E and hunter-gatherer? Eastern hunter-gatherers are descended from A&E, so someone's confused. went into two different populations. They went east into the in Native Americans, and then they went west to become Eastern hunter-gatherers, Eastern European hunter-gatherers. Oh, speaking of beer and sacraments, have you partaken in magic mushrooms or ayahuasca? Do you plan to? We have Bucky in Ireland too. Much love. Thank you for the donation. I've already covered magic mushrooms in detail in the mead video. Everything you need to know about mushrooms is there. No, I've never taken ayahuasca. I saw ayahuasca camps in Bolivia when I was there, and I was disgusted that it was commercialization of what is a ritual. The point of the ayahuasca ritual is that it's a ritual, and my views on this are made explicit in the mead of poetry video. So, and also on an article on my blog called Hyperborean Hallucinogens. Thank you for the donation. I hope you find that if you look for those, you'll find all the answers you need. Daniel Robert Prieto, thank you for another donation, Daniel. Christianity has clearly become a reflection of our spirit. Clearly, he says. Would it make sense for a new paganism to incorporate elements of Christianity? What Christian elements would you keep? Well, obviously, whatever happens in future, we have now been Christian. Everything we know about paganism comes from us through Christianity. Everything we understand about, whether it's folklore, the folkloric old pagan traditions preserved by peasants, whether it's what's written down by Christian monks. I mean, all Germanic pagans anyway. We have some original pagan sources for the Greeks and Romans written down by pagans, and by the Vedic pagans written down. But what I would say is that what can be kept is what things should be kept are what are ingrained in the culture, because for any kind of change to happen, there needs to be continuity. So that's why I endorse for the main pagan festivals should be those that were replaced with Christian festivals which are still practiced. So Christmas and Easter, for example. The Yule and Easter should be main things because they're already established as important calendar celebrations. So in that way, we should look at paganism as being you shouldn't try to reinvent the calendar, reinvent everything, reinvent the wheel. Just try to look at elements that the most pagan elements of Christianity, and those are the elements of Christianity that should be kept for practicing pagans. I hope that answers your question. Hacking civilization. Thank you for your donation. Given the role of strength and martiality in the law and traditions, do you think it is necessary to integrate that into paganism, or are you more in the too much focus on militancy camp? My views on the military is that the military is the military. I mean, I don't think there's too much focus on the militancy. I think I make quite clear my view of society, that a hierarchical society of the Indo-European model, and that a function within that is that of the warrior, and that function has its part of society. It can't be enlarged. It shouldn't be enlarged or diminished. It is what it is. It is part, and those who are so inclined to be warriors must be warriors. That's nothing else to it. There's no matter of opinion on whether it should be increased or we should be, or whether it should be integrated. Of course, it has to be integrated, because it's not like there's one model for human existence as far as in the European views. One model with the top. The most important thing is the priest caste. Warrior castes are also very important. That as another route to the divine, the route of a warrior. And then the rest of us have other ways. If you work a normal job, and then you're a Vaishya, like equivalent of a Vaishya. You should, in your work and your life, find ways to devote yourself to the gods, and to devote your wealth, transfer an element of a portion of your wealth to to divine purposes, like through sacrifice or whatever. They can't give up offerings. But yeah, I think that military martiality has a divine element to it. The soldier, the warrior is a divine archetype, and so it's there. It needs to be there. It can't surpass that of the priest, but it can't be subordinate to the merchant either. Let me see. Message retracted from a Dane. Thank you for your retracted message. Do I still get the money? I can't read it anyway. Will you? Oh, we got an atheist here. We got an atheist. Do you realize belief mentality is the root of evil? Fedora tipped. If only we could all be euphoric atheists, enlightened. Oh. So the tips. Can you recommend any musicians that are similar to Peter Bellamy, the Young Tradition? Yeah, sure. All right then. Let me just get my the Young Tradition, the Watersons. The Watersons. Do you know the Watersons? Listen to them. They're brilliant, and they're fantastic. They're one of my favorites, and not just the Watersons are the whole group. They're called the Watersons, but then also the individual members of the Waterson family did separate stuff. Lal and Mike Waterson, just Lal and Mike Waterson is called Lal and Mike Waterson. They're great too. And Domino Recordings reissued one of their records from the 70s recently. So beautiful. Love that kind of folk music. And Briggs, and Briggs is great. Moody Stankus said that. Yeah, he's good tip. Love Anne Briggs. Beautiful voice. Gary Tucker thinks that the WHG had an afro. No, they didn't have afro hair. No. I don't know why you think that. Even the model didn't have afro hair. It had straight hair. Not a Fed says, have you heard of the band Hylong? Yes, I have. In your view, what films reflect the pagan Indo-European spirit best? Ooh, difficult. In one sense, Westerns do, because Westerns are basically so much Indo-European, like the horse-bound aspect. It depends what you mean, like Indo-European. Do you mean like Indo-European in the sense of like when we talk about the Germanics, the Slavics, the Celtics as being like the Indo-European family, or do you mean specific like the Proto-Indo-European steppes people? Because if it's the steppes people, I suppose you could say Westerns. But I think like otherwise, I guess check out, by the way, the podcast Guide to Culture, spelled Kulchur, on which I have appeared several times. They do film reviews mainly from a sort of esoteric rightist perspective, and a lot of the films on there are like top-notch, good pieces of cinema that I really like. And I mean, Tarkovsky is he's a Christian, so not a pagan, but I just think, I mean, like there aren't pagan filmmakers really. So I just think of like films that have transcendent qualities. That's a religious mentality like behind it. So basically, I guess the best thing you can get for a pagan film would be actually a Christian film or something like that, because most filmmakers, like, they're not Christians. They're sort of atheisty, sort of, but whatever. But they're I love Tarkovsky. I love Ingmar Bergman, the Swedish director. Although I believe he's an atheist. I love that sort of thing. Jodorowsky is a South American Jew, I think, but he's really good. He's like all about like esoteric imagery and transcendent qualities in cinema. That kind of thing is closer to pagan, as close to pagan filmmaking as you got at the moment, unfortunately. Except for my films, of course. Yeah. Mine are just documentaries, not so artistic. Princess Mononoke is a pagan film. Yeah, I suppose it is. Actually, Japanese cinema, of course, I should have said that too. Because Japanese film is it has more of that honor culture to it. Yeah, I love that. I love Onibaba, the old Japanese horror film. And what's that other film? The one with the meme where that everyone always the Burmese harp's quite good. That's not so transcendent. It's just about like Japanese soldiers in Burma during the Second World War. But yeah, I like that film. It's a good piece of cinema. Onibaba, I already said. Rashomon, that was what I was thinking. That film's great too. That's the one where there's that meme that people have where he says, "You've been with two men. Why don't you kill yourself?" But yeah, Japanese cinema, Russian cinema, I like. Thank you for your donation, Nanabiju62 from Canada. Greyman, does science coexist with paganism? Yes, it does. I mean, technically, yes. Like I said this before, there should be no conflict between the physical and the metaphysical. Science is the study of physical phenomena, nothing else. That's all it is. And it cannot explain metaphysical matters. It cannot ever do that. If a scientist presumes that he can explain the metaphysical by looking at physical phenomena, then he is no longer a scientist. He ceases he's gone beyond the limits of his discipline. And any metaphysical discipline that tries to, invalidate the findings of science is usually just a quack. They can't accept the reality of something because their belief requires, something to have occurred at a certain time in history. Like especially the case of religions, historical religions, religions that have that require a belief in a historical event to have occurred at a certain time, which paganism doesn't have. You don't have to believe that the Odin did X on this day. So like there's no historical element to it. Like everything all the myths are true, but they occur outside, and they don't occur in the sense that they of like within space time. They're on another plane, the metaphysical. I hope that answers your question. Are you aware of Anastasianism, and says this Danish chap Synolf, and the notion of kindred homesteading? No, I don't know about that. What is your view on communal pagan homesteading initiatives in general? None of them have been successful. Nothing has yielded any positive results in that in that endeavor. I generally think that people should be realistic about that you're going to do with your life. If you're part of a community, then you're doing well. If you're going to try and manufacture a community, that smacks to me of New Ageism. You can't manufacture communities. That's not authentic. Communities arise naturally and through historical circumstances. I suppose though there are exceptions like the Amish and like the Mennonites, that these Christian sects. So you could, and like also of course like these crazy hippie cults and stuff that went into, like drink the Kool-Aid and whatever. But I mean, that's not what paganism's about. So I would just say, if you want to homestead, then do it. But yeah, it's not like a religious act. It's just, and if you're trying to, it's such a like Christian thing. This idea of like getting the community, a religious community, and then going out into the wild to try and get away from everyone. That is literally like what the Amish did, the Mennonites did, all these different like Protestants, low church sects. And that's not what pagans ever did. Aaron's Destiny. Does a supreme godhead like Krishna exist in Germanic paganism? Well, no, not in any recorded source, but Krishna didn't exist in Vedic religion either. You see, like the notion of a supreme godhead is just derives naturally in all religions that develop advanced metaphysics. It's a product of rational application of rational thought to the problem of metaphysics. So the only thing that varies is which. Sometimes they give this. Sometimes they choose, and even in the Vedic religion, there was differences. Some people say originally they would say that this god was beyond, it had no name, it was unknowable, and then later they start to, like the Krishna cult, they start saying Krishna, which means dark originally, and then they're saying that Krishna is the perfect manifestation of this one, and so Krishna becomes like the one godhead. But this is Krishna, like ISKCON, like Krishna consciousness, a very long way away from Vedic religion. It's very, very, very different. So, and just like the Greeks and Romans, this stuff developed there too. That this kind of thinking, like they start to develop like Plato's concept of the one, but they don't actually give it a name. They don't give it a sign. Like they don't say the Jupiter is the perfect representation of the one, so let's call Jupiter the one. They don't do that. Like in India, that happened among some cults. Now, among Germanic people, I'm sure something similar happened. Even like quite primitive Native American tribes thought of one spirit being above all the other spirits, an unknowable spirit above all. And I'm sure Germanic people had some concept of it, but they didn't worship it directly. Just like the Vedic people did not worship the one directly. You're not supposed to worship the one. The one is it's in everything anyway. So no matter what you worship, you're worshiping the one. Why do you recommend boring? Okay. Rob Bart, thanks for a donation. Really enjoying your content. I should correct your statement from before that the name Easter only survived in England. In Germany, it's known as Ostern. I said Ostara. Actually, I don't know why you're saying Ostern, because my understanding is that Grimm said Ostara. I don't know what the source is that for. Are you saying that it's called? Oh, it's called that. Are you saying that the day is called that in German? In Germany, you call Easter Ostern. Oh, Kevin Bayon, Ostern is the modern German word derived from Ostar. So yeah, it's derived from it, but is it, and what, I don't know. I should look into that. So is it Ostara is Old High German? Maybe Kevin can clear it up. I watched Esprit de Corps says, and thank you for the donation. I watched a documentary on cats, and they mentioned that there is a higher percentage of orange cats everywhere Vikings settled. And since orange is associated with Thor, I was wondering if cats played any similar role. I don't think they did. No, I mean cats aren't associated with any god in any mythology. Some people say, I mean, maybe Freya's chariot is drawn by cats, so you could assume that therefore it was associated with her. And there's apparently some kind of custom where the cat was given as a gift at Viking weddings, so perhaps that was involved. And also, if we're to assume that Thrymskida is gives an example when Thor wears the bridal veil and disguises himself so that he can get his hammer back, because they have to place the hammer in the bride's lap. And we assume this reflects an actual custom in which the hammer of Thor was placed into the bride's lap. Then perhaps marriage ceremonies were associated with Thor. But there's also Vur. Vur is the goddess of the oaths between lovers. So we assume that the marriage ceremony was associated with Vur, really. But interesting. I don't think cats are associated with Thor, though. I wouldn't think that. I think that's too far to go. But yeah, I do know that a lot of cats in Britain have Viking cat DNA. Although all domestic cats come from Egypt, like North Africa. Although some of the cats in Britain have interbred with the wild cats of the British Isles, it's not a significant amount of that blood, because if your cat has kittens, and because she gets preggers from a wild cat, then those kittens will be bitey and unpleasant to have around. Okay, I'm going to wrap things up, people. The original Conan is a great film, says Brian G. Yeah, I think it's great. It's fun. I love Arnold Schwarzenegger. Actually, you know what? I think Predator is a great film. It's a pagan film in a sense, because it's man versus the beast, man versus the dragon. Predator, I've said this before, it's like Beowulf in a way. At least, Beowulf, the hero, is Arnie. Grendel is the predator in a way. But also the predator is more honorable than Grendel. So perhaps it's a little bit different. But I just think Predator is a great film. So so Kevin says Ostern comes from Old High German Ostarun. So yeah, it's certainly cognate anyway. So there's no reason to question that. Well, I think that's enough for tonight. And everyone, tomorrow is the beginning of Easter month. So I wish you all a blessed and propitious and fortuitous and very wonderful Easter month. So goodbye from me and good night.